There is a cartridge that America used to take into the deepest wilderness on the continent, into grizzly country, into the dense timber of the Pacific Northwest, where a shot might come at 30 yards, and the animal on the other end of it might not go down on the first bullet. A cartridge that serious hunters trusted with their lives in country that did not forgive mistakes. Winchester stopped making it in 1958. Most hunters alive today have never heard of it. This is the story of how America lost the .348 Winchester, and why the men who carried it never forgot what they lost. To understand what the .348 Winchester was, you have to understand the world it came from. In 1936, the bolt-action rifle was not yet king. The lever-action was still the rifle that serious American hunters trusted in heavy country. Fast to operate, reliable in cold weather, a design that had been proven in the field since before the turn of the century. The man who built the finest lever actions America ever produced was John Moses Browning. His 1886 design was the benchmark everything else was measured against. Strong enough to handle cartridges that would destroy lesser actions. Smooth enough that a practiced hand could work it nearly as fast as a semi-automatic. Winchester took that foundation in 1936 and built something new on top of it. They called it the Model 71, and they chambered it for a cartridge that did not exist until that moment, the .348 Winchester. The numbers were serious. A 200-grain bullet leaving the muzzle at 2,520 feet per second, and a 250-grain bullet at 2,350 feet per second. For a lever-action rifle, those figures were remarkable. This was not a deer cartridge dressed up in lever-action clothing. This was a genuine, large-game cartridge capable of taking every animal on the North American continent cleanly at the distances a hunter actually encounters them in heavy timber. Elk, moose, grizzly bear. The .348 handled all of it. The Model 71 that fired it was built to match. Machined steel throughout. A receiver strong enough to handle the pressures the cartridge demanded. A lever that cycled with the kind of smoothness that only comes from parts fitted by people who understood what fitted meant. It was heavy by modern standards, around 8.5 pounds unscoped. In the field, that weight became an advantage. It absorbed recoil and steadied the rifle on a quick second shot in the kind of close country where second shots happen. The hunters who found the Model 71 and the .348 Winchester tended to keep them. Not because they had no other options, because once you had carried something that capable into serious country and trusted it in situations where being wrong was not recoverable, you did not let it go easily. Elmer Keith, who trusted very few factory cartridges with his full approval, wrote positively about the .348 Winchester and the Model 71. For a man who spent his career arguing that American hunters were undergunned, a lever-action cartridge capable of stopping a grizzly at reasonable distances was exactly the kind of thing he could respect. Keith understood margin. The .348 had margin. Jack O'Connor was less enthusiastic. He was a bolt-action man and a .270 man, and he never pretended otherwise. He acknowledged the .348 was capable, but it was not his kind of rifle, and he said so honestly. That difference of opinion between the two most influential gun writers in America reflected something real about the cartridge. It was not a rifle for every hunter. It was a rifle for a specific kind of hunting in a specific kind of country. The men who hunted that country knew exactly what it was worth. If this is the kind of story you want more of, real history about the cartridges and the rifles that shaped American hunting, subscribe now. There is a lot more where this came from. By the early 1950s, the world the .348 Winchester had been built for was changing. The bolt-action rifle was taking over. The surplus military actions coming back from the Second World War had put accurate, affordable bolt actions into the hands of a generation of American hunters who had carried them across Europe and the Pacific and trusted them completely. Remington and Winchester were both building modern bolt actions that were accurate, reliable, and increasingly affordable. The lever action was starting to look like a tradition rather than a tool. Winchester was watching the sales figures for the Model 71, and they were not encouraging. The rifle was expensive to build. The cartridge was proprietary, meaning a hunter who wanted to shoot a .348 Winchester had to buy Winchester ammunition because nothing else existed. In a market moving toward bolt actions chambered in cartridges available everywhere, that was a significant disadvantage. In 1958, Winchester made the decision. The Model 71 was discontinued, and the .348 Winchester cartridge went with it. There was no announcement that captured the gravity of what was happening. There was no acknowledgement that a serious tool for serious hunters was being retired because the accounting department had made a calculation. The rifles that remained in inventory sold out. Ammunition gradually disappeared from shelves. Hunters who had built their approach to heavy country around the Model 71 and the .348 were left looking at a market that no longer offered them what they needed. Some of them adapted. They moved to bolt actions in .375 Holland & Holland or .338 Winchester Magnum, which Winchester introduced that same year, as if to soften the blow of losing the .348. Some of them never fully made peace with the change. They held on to their Model 71s and bought every box of .348 ammunition they could find. They hand-loaded when factory ammunition became impossible to source. They passed the rifles to sons who passed them to grandsons, with the instruction that this was not something you sold. The rifles survived in that way, carefully, quietly, in gun safes in Alaska, in the Pacific Northwest, and in the Upper Midwest, in the hands of families who understood what they had. What Winchester had not calculated, the same thing they would fail to calculate 6 years later when they changed the Model 70, was that a rifle trusted in genuine wilderness by serious hunters does not just occupy a market position. It occupies a place in the way those hunters understand what a rifle should be. When you take it away, you do not just lose the sale of that rifle. You lose the loyalty of every man who trusted it, and every son he would have guided toward the same choice. Browning reintroduced a version of the Model 71 in the 1980s as a limited edition. It sold out. The demand was still there 25 years after Winchester had decided the market no longer wanted it. Starline still manufactures brass for handloaders who refuse to let the cartridge die completely. Original Model 71 rifles in good condition command serious money at auction, far more than their original sale price adjusted for inflation. The .348 Winchester is officially a discontinued cartridge. No major manufacturer chambers a production rifle for it today. The hunters who carry one into the field in 2026 are carrying a piece of history that Winchester decided was no longer worth making 68 years ago. They were wrong about that. The men in the field knew it immediately. It just took the rest of the market a few decades to agree. What the story of the .348 Winchester is really about is a decision made in an office by people looking at numbers on a page about a tool they could not fully understand from an office. The men who built their hunting lives around the Model 71 and the .348 were not being sentimental. They were accurate. The cartridge did something that nothing else on the market did in quite the same way. When it was gone, they knew it immediately, because nothing that came after filled the same space in exactly the same way. That is what it means to lose something that was genuinely right. Not that nothing else works. Something else always works. But the specific combination of qualities that made the thing right for the specific purpose it was built for does not simply reappear in a different package because a manufacturer decided to move on. The .348 Winchester is still out there, in private hands, in old ammunition cans in the back of closets, in rifles that have been carried into more serious country than most modern hunters will ever see, waiting for the man who understands what he is holding.